I guess I can go first. Hi,
Yeah.
I'm Sasin. I use my name as a pronoun, Sasin, Sasin, Sasins. And um, yeah, I've been friends with Tony for a while. And so, yeah, thank you for setting this up.
Don't forget to mention what you do and the purpose of, what you're looking to share with people.
Got it. Right. So, we're here as a performing arts Japanese drumming group, aka Taiko. And our group is called Mujo Dream Flight, and I'll let some of my colleagues explain more about that. But yeah, we do performances. I mean, all over LA, but also, we're going on tour soon, all over the Western United States. And we are also educators. We teach in schools, so youth, adults, um, yeah, pretty experienced in a lot of these different kinds of things. And as trans non-binary people, we also do a lot of advocacy. And so, one thing I really hope we're able to talk about today is the intersections of these things, because while some people have heard of or seen Taiko, and some people may not have, but really the intersection of these things, of our identities, there's even um, fewer of us doing what we're doing and bringing the energy and insight that we are bringing. Like, this fundamentally affects our art and our approach and what we even think art and community building and activism even is. So I really hope that we can, yeah, like, we're not just here to represent Taiko. We are here to represent like much more of our whole selves, because that's what we bring to Taiko anyway. So yeah, glad to be here.
Cool. Man, you would be next, and then Lazine.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Man. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. Um, Thank you, Dustin, for getting us started. This is always really hard for me to like, where do we start to introduce ourselves? Because I do wear a lot of different hats. And so in this space in particular, yeah, I'm one of the co-founder of Mujo Dream Flight. And I am a taiko artist, educator, um, and activist. Um, I am I am originally from Hong Kong, so I speak multiple languages as and Cantonese is my native language, and English. Well, Cantonese and language and English are both my language, I would say. Um, and today, like, I think we are particularly gearing ourselves up for this tour that's happening in just actually a little more than a week. And um, it's quite a pretty big project. And I think I, even though this tour is only happening for a month, wow, like it feels like I'm searching for the right word to even describe that. I feel like this is the beginning of so many more ambitions, projects, and representations, change, creativity, artistically, culturally, that we're doing. Um, yeah, I'm gonna pass it to Mazain for now because there's just so much that I'm still organizing my thoughts right now. Thank you for having us here.
Okay, I guess that leaves me then. So, hi, I'm Mazayan. I use Fay Fair Fairs pronouns. Um, and yeah, one of the co-founders of Mujo Dream Flight. Um, Taiko player, activist, educator. Yeah, I also do some like I'm a participant in and do some mentoring work with the University of Southern California Kazan Taiko. So that's an important part of, I guess, my Taiko identity and my Taiko practice. Yeah, gearing up for this tour, which is it's titled Heimweh Tour. Heimweh is the Bavarian word for homesickness, and yeah, we can get more into this later in the interview. But the initial impetus was, for me, I'm originally from the Twin Cities, Minnesota, and ever since I came out as trans, my parents have been horribly unsupportive and ultimately like stepped in to like make sure I didn't get to go to my brother's wedding. And so I was like frustrated and I had all these belongings at my parents' house that I wanted to get back. And I was like, if only we could road trip out there and do like Taiko workshops all along the way, and kind of make a tour out of this. And Sasson was like, yeah, we can totally do that. So that's how this started. And now it's blossoming into this whole project around, highlighting how trans, non-binary people's relationships to home and family can be so fraught and threatened, especially, in the face of this rising trans antagonism we're seeing in this country. So yeah, I guess I'll leave it at there for now, but thank you so much for having us.
So I like to start throwing numbers at people and kind of like showcasing the trivia around a given topic or culture. And I'll start with Reddit. So there's a subreddit known as Taiko no Tatsuji. It currently has over 17,000 members. And they post everything from DIY taiko drum setups to video games featuring rhythms and stuff like that, and many other things based on overview at that current subreddit. And I'm curious to know as to whether or not, besides Instagram, which is the platform I know you folks are more established on, whether or not you established elsewhere, or if you're looking even to branch out elsewhere, because based on my research, taiko is very much a cultural thing, and it's also a niche thing, but it's present basically everywhere you look for it. So I'll launch that one with Mon first, and then we'll follow up with Sasen, and then Lazai.
Hi, thank you. Looking for the unmute button. Still navigating this this interface. So this is actually a really interesting way to start, because when I talked about I play taiko to people who have no idea this whole community and art form and history of that, like a lot of people would be like, "Oh, do you play that video game? Is that what you do as a profession?" Um, and and I just have a moment to realize that, am I getting the question correctly?
No, you're on. I'm not asking about a video game specifically, but they do have a lot of video games clips that they do share in that subreddit. But for all intents and purposes, all these 17,000 members I pointed to, they share what they care about, and in this case, it seems to be taiko, like taiko stuff, taiko drums, DIY, taiko building, taiko arcades I see as well, and taiko videos linked from YouTube.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, this is like, I feel like I'm like, because being so new on this platform, I'm like still like navigating, understanding, okay, what exactly are we talking about? So yeah, taiko, like it's such a umbrella term for so many things and so many people involved in this like uh, art form. Like there are just so many different aspects of that, and I would say like personally when I get into this community, what draws to me most, like even actually having such a great impact on me that I ended up decide to immigrate to the United States to be a part of the Taiko community, and there is this huge community in North America that's coming out from of the like the history of Taiko being a part of the civil rights movement and Japanese American like utilizing Taiko as a vehicle to create space for healing and community, and that is actually one of like what draws me into learning so much more, like was being mentioned of like how people be like being resourceful and like not only accessing to taiko that's traditionally made with like with technique that like in Japan using the whole tree trunk, or that now became very popular in the United States, that started in the United States, that using wine barrels and creating drums, or even just using whatever like tires. Or sometimes as a taiko practitioner, we also think of taikoing, it's beyond the drum. It's about like embodiment. It's about connection. It's about understanding the culture, the history, the language, and um and also like the art form has evolved so much that taiko used to be historically like ties to ceremonies, religious practice, and festivals, and to these days taiko became an art form on its own, being put on stage, and there's composition, there's like technique, there is so much more resources and focus being put on that. And yeah, so there's just so much. Like I'm gonna pause here. Let's have someone else jump in. Like
Yeah, that'll be Sasha coming up next.
Cool. Manman, thank you so much for talking about taiko as communities and taiko as instruments, and like also, what Manman was saying about repurposing wine barrels. That's something that's a really important part of American contributions to taiko making, and which is necessary for using taiko as culture building, community building here in the U.S. So, but I feel what you were saying about taiko drum master, taiko no tatsujin. Like for so many people, that may be the first time that they've sort of seen taiko, especially like in an arcade setting. And I mean, to be honest, we love it. It's adorable, and like it actually does end up teaching like the names of the characters, and sort of how and where you hit the drum. It's a really amazingly cute and effective approximation, I suppose, of what we're doing. And so like that rhythm game, I mean, I will admit, having like owned like, oh gosh, like a PS2 version of it, but like a tiny little in-home version of it, like back in the day. It's funny, like I was terrible at the rhythm game, like, I mean, not too shabby at taiko playing itself, but yeah, I mean, I think it exactly encapsulates the spirit of taiko, which is to get people together, make some music, move your body. So what that brings me to is that like in terms of online taiko, and especially how we relate to that. So like, first off, I'm going to say we're a pretty new group. Like we ourselves have been playing for quite a while, but us coming together as a trio and, and then creating a more expansive group out of that is something that is a mid-pandemic creation, just last year. So in terms of social media and whatnot, like that is something that we're doing in addition to repertoire, teaching, everything else that artists do. So, we say, we begin Taiko spaces, we always say, a really common Japanese greeting, we always say, yoroshiku onegaishimasu. And this is also used when people are introducing each other, meeting each other for the very first time, like, oh, this is my name, yoroshiku onegaishimasu, so on. Pleasure to meet you kind of thing. But we also use it because it has a meaning of, please bear with me, please be kind to me as we work together to try to do something. So when it comes to some amount of social media stuff, I will say, yoroshiku onegaishimasu, like it's coming. There's just a lot of priorities. But I do also want to focus on, you asked a little bit more generally in terms of Taiko and online spaces and all that. So there is a Facebook Taiko community, though really that only started to exist, I want to say, I remember talking about it at a conference in 2011, and it was just a twinkle in someone's eyes, So but the cool thing is that like we have been able to do a lot of at least English speaking, like large scale connections. So most of it has been on Facebook, to be honest, which for me as a person who refuses to use Facebook, like that has been difficult to participate in. There was a Facebook to Twitter or Facebook to Gmail, Facebook to Google Groups bridge for a little while, but it didn't work super well. The tech for it didn't work super well. And I think it eventually stopped working, and Google Groups is, I believe, dead now. So that's a thing. But just like stepping back from even all of that, I just want to say that, Taiko is so much of it, like when we play, it is also about unplugging and intentionally choosing in-person interactions. During the pandemic, we've had to figure out how to not do in person and like have electronic community building and music making and teaching and sharing and all of that jazz. But both just out of sort of respect for what it is, not respect, out of valuing, like this is part of the value of Taiko, is that it gets you out of your seat. It can, if that is something that is accessible and available for you. You can, of course, also do it in your seat, too. That is very much an important thing in our community. And also, it's multi-generational. And so there's an accessibility issue as well. So I myself have been very frustrated, especially when I started playing Taiko in San Francisco in 2008. Like, I made my first Taiko group's first website. It was a free WordPress site. I didn't have a budget. But and I was just shocked at how, not online a lot of Taiko groups were. And it was frustrating at the time. And that being said, I think one of the things that is really pushing us to get more online, so that we're not really niche, but there is that kind of idea that we're niche, so to kind of make it clearer to people that we're not niche and sort of be more findable in search engines and so on, is honestly, isolation is a really important part of why Taiko people turn to social media. And that isolation can be an economic one, where in order to be able to find clients, sell products, and so on, people want to have more of an online presence, of course. So that's the usual thing. But also when we are in parts of the country or parts of the world where, other people that we've trained in Taiko with, or maybe there just isn't a Taiko group around, or maybe there isn't one around that will accept you. The community is very tight knit, but it can, whenever you move, it can be really difficult to find people to come together with and play with and be able to keep learning and growing and creating. So a lot, especially being in LA, I mean, for myself, I should just speak for myself, that in a way, finally being in LA, which is such a Taiko hub, I've actually stepped back on using social media as much, even compared to when I lived in San Diego and was coming to LA regularly. Still, like me getting on Instagram was so that I could connect with Taiko people and, also put up more media about what I do. And indeed, yes, Instagram is a really great platform for that, because what we do is so visual in terms of photographs and video and so on. So basically, yeah, I mean, we are on YouTube. That's, yeah, again, video. We also, like, sometimes we teach and we have videos of things that we've taught, either streams, say from Zoom, or also on, Mazan was teaching and doing, like, we've done composition work on Twitch before. Yeah. Yeah, we've tried to do like different kinds of, like, done a little bit of like stitching, reeling, and this kind of stuff too. But yeah, we're very much like, it's not that we're like unwilling to experiment with these sorts of things. We're very much doing it. And I think different ways of using social media, is important for us as artists too. So yeah, design.
Yeah, and yeah, I just kind of want to thank you for like pointing out about the topic of isolation and how that impacts this whole conversation, especially as that like ties into like what we're going to be talking about with tour. Like that term that Sassen coined, Taiko hubs. What makes something a Taiko hub or not a Taiko hub? And when we look at like some of the places where people are either unable to or struggling to engage in this art form, build a community to do it. We're looking at places where there's increased isolation for Asian American, Asian folks, certainly trans, non-binary folks. And then when you add the intersection of those two, it's just exponentially even worse. So like this whole concept of isolation really having a strong impact on how people are able to engage in this art form and in this community, and that of course being racialized, and how this art form is often perceived and exotified. So I think in terms of the use of social media, I think it's really important that it be used to kind of like foster a sense of connection and maybe bringing more people into community as opposed to like a lens of consumption. And I think that's something that we're really trying, we talk and think a lot about, we're trying to be really conscious of with our group, and we know lots of others in our community are as well. So yeah, Twitch was interesting, because I think the thing that at least from my experience of it, that I really liked was the ability to kind of real-time interact with other people in practice. I mean, it was through text, so it was a little bit like, step away from the tire drum or what have you to like chat with people. But having that sense of like being able to chat with people on break in a practice, as opposed to like I'm doing a performance, like for people to just sit back and watch and not interact with. I'm trying to think of anything else on this topic of like social media and I just want to point out that Sassen had like a really, really cool project and idea over the pandemic. It's on Instagram. It's called Thai Contagion. And it was based off of this idea of like viral seeds. Like Sassen would start by playing a thing and recording it, and then other people would take it and add on another layer and like pass it around. And I just think something like that is a really, really cool example of how like we can use social media and technology and recording technology to still communally create together within our art form. Oh, and I see Ron has a hand raised, so I'm gonna pass it off.
Thank you. Earlier on I provide like general context, and now um hearing Salsa and the Sign speak, I'm like, like social media, there's just so many different ways. On the note of the Sign saying like how has been used like during the pandemic, I was involved with a different collaborative collective that like in the early, like literally in March 2020, we transformed last minute transformed a supposedly in-person concert, and then turned it into the first online concert in the community. And I mean, luckily we have the collaborator that I worked with at the time, Amy Naylor. We have the skills to do editing videos and sound editing, and then distribute like videos and like do like a lot of and then did a 2 hours virtual concert, and involved like originally we were just gonna collaborate with the local group and several other artists, but because of the online connections, we were able to actually involve like international artists, like artists from Taiko practitioners and Taiko artists from Japan, from Europe, from Hong Kong, from South America, North America, and so many more. And like that is like one aspect of social media. And I'm not like, I'm currently on this platform that I'm completely new with, but then like I have a social media existence, and in terms of like somehow I start to feel like oh my gosh, like the so-called older forms of social media existence is like I have a lot of Facebook page, I have a lot of YouTube. I use YouTube account mostly just to archive my practice, my like students or myself practice or creative practice with Taiko. And I also started doing some like podcast recording stuff, like as an advocacy for like neurodivergence and Taiko. And also I've also been involved in other another YouTube or content creating regarding ableism, anti-ableism with Taiko. Basically creating accessible Taiko. It was originally started as creating Taiko content and curriculum for folks with Parkinson's, but then it's also evolved into like making Taiko accessible for people with mobility challenge, because I myself also have a condition that like does affect my mobility from time to time. And so so on the topic of like social media, so there's so many different ways of existing on social media.
A lot of the strangers I personally navigate, I think in terms of doing research, a lot of that basically is online, resource wise, community wise, even events wise, from what I noticed. So from what I'm noticing, this whole idea of Taiko champions this idea of being unplugged while still in a weird way, butting right up against this idea that you have to be chronically online to be kept up with everything. So how do you folks organize accordingly? And it seems like Sasan wants to take this on.
Yeah. I actually wanted to start with a little bit of pushback, just knowing you, because you say that you do all your research online, but actually, I mean, I met you in person. I met you in the streets. Like, I met you, helping others. I met you when I had a drum, slung across my chest so that I could be using Taiko and using what resources I had to help and just to build solidarity, in our city. So, I mean, yeah, I feel like I also know you to be a very in-person kind of person too. So, like, I guess I just want to say that, like, we are multitudes, um, like I put part of why I'm pushing back is because, like, for me, it's an issue of assimilation pressure. Like, so I would not be okay with, like, just having this idea that, well, you know, oh, we're only valuing unplugging, or um because I mean, it's like it's a mix of things, right? So how do you organize, right? And yeah, I mean, that's the thing, is like going back through, like scrolling back through Instagram, like that was how I got involved in, like, local racial justice protests. That was, like through activists and organizers in the area, just people who wanted to come out and do something, people who wanted to, you know, um, like meet and try to change things. And so, to me, the social it's the same in Taiko, is basically what I'm trying to say. That, like some connections and plan making can be done online, and then we use, frankly, a ton of tech. Like we, as a Taiko person, I create so much more media than I did before I was a Taiko person. Um, because we need that. I mean, it's of part of our learning process, part of our, part of the process of getting ourselves out there, getting our messages out there. So it's like we live in this interface of online and not online. And going back to, I brought up isolation. So to be more concrete about that, I mentioned that I started in San Francisco, but, like, I've also played taiko in the Boston area, also, like, New York and Providence, Rhode Island, which does have an increasing taiko community. I mean, New York has had one for a while now, for decades, for sure. But my experience was that, like, I did have local taiko groups that I was studying with at the time, and what I really felt I needed, and what I was turning, especially at that point in my life, like 2011, or yeah, 2013, I was looking for connection to different styles of taiko, especially styles that I missed training in, just because, whatever group you're working with, like, someone else calls the shots, right? So, and you work on what they want you to work on, right? And so, in order to kind of keep certain things alive in my own heart as an artist, I was looking for online resources, and whether that's YouTube, I mean, just scouring all these, like, Web 1.0 things, like just learning more about taiko history and how the community in North America has been built, trying to figure out the who's who, because, like, we're tight knit, and you can get to meet some super famous people, like, really easily with taiko, I feel like. Pretty amazing. But, but still, like, it helps to sort of know who and what to seek out. And so for me, that was just a really important part of staying in the game, and just valuing the resources that I had in person, and also, like, when I felt like I wanted more than that, to be making these other connections, and then eventually be branching out, so that I'm, like, traveling from, say, Boston to New York, or traveling from San Diego to LA, or San Diego to SF. There have been times, not that long ago, where I'm literally going up, SoCal, NorCal, like, every week to be, to be helping debut, like, really important pieces. Like, and to be clear, like, when it comes to taiko, there's a lot of pressure for us to just be, like, happy, smiling, like, exciting, look at how cool this is, what we can do, look at how loud and exuberant we are. And that, taking space for joy, is important. But also, we are also we are creating art that is speaking to current issues. So when I was going up to San Francisco, that was to help support my first Taiko teacher, Sensei Bruce Muigent, to create a piece that was about child separation at the border. It was super dark. It was really dark. Also incredibly challenging and just an amazing piece of work. And so there's a lot of organizing that we're doing through personal connections as well. And I think it's neat that the Taiko community, as much as we can, not to say there's no injustice and no people getting left out, because there are, but this kind of networking and like trying to meet and work with as many people as you can, or as interest you, I should say, like that becomes an important avenue for future opportunities. And so in a way, this tour that we're doing is a kind of organizing, right? We spoke of Taiko hubs earlier. The reason I came up with that term is because I needed a way to refer to places that are not Taiko hubs, places where folks are more isolated, and it's like, you feel so alone and you feel like, should I just give up? And, these days we have more online resources. We have, thanks to the pandemic, pre-pandemic too, but still, there's way more people who are doing like online virtual classes, or also online private lessons and things like that. There's even there's a site that does like on demand online lessons that you can learn at your own pace. So there is a lot more of that, and we also have websites that have a lot more information that's been collected, especially by academics, ethnomusicologists, folks who are, actually both participating with us as part of the Taiko community, and also studying us in real time, right? As the community that we are. And so thanks to them, and thanks to, funding and resources, and so much donated time, so much labor, that often goes unthanked. Like, we have more resources online, for people to like look up repertoire that is, as we say, like open source, or copyleft, Creative Commons style, so that people, can have material, to be learning and playing with their groups and so on. And these are things that I'm glad that we have more of. But even still, coming in person, what's the point of a tour? What's the point of performing? So many art forms, the metric of the unit of production is let's say writing a score, composing a score, or maybe even a video of some orchestra, or some, a chamber music group or something, playing that. Or if it's dance choreography, a video of a company doing your ballet or what have you, right? And I know this is just a selection of art forms that I cherry picked, but the point is that for Taiko, of course, especially, here in America, we are, we're subject to these expectations and pressures too. And so we do some of that, but I think it's also useful for us to relish, in kind of a anti-colonial, anti sort of groupthink kind of way of relishing connections that we do in person. Also, traveling artists, that's something that there's been a history of forever, right? And also intentionally bringing conferences, fairs, arts fairs. Again, these are things that I don't know, I just feel I feel a deep connection to like greater roots when I'm doing something like that. And even if you're just sitting around and like drinking and having fun, just whatever you're doing to enjoy yourself, like that is humanity. It's not nothing. And as someone who's like often shy in some social spaces, like like in protest spaces, like yes, I try to, like where you met me, I try to do what I can. I try to advocate when needed, but also like I do like to step back too. And but it just feels totally different when I'm in person, and like when there's intentionality to the gathering. There's just a certain way that we can not just be ourselves, but also then as human beings, like work in solidarity together and create things that we didn't even know we could do, that there wasn't even the possibility for. There are those possibilities, different sets, different kinds of possibilities working online as well. And absolutely, we are definitely exploring that, as Mazain brought up, like trying to push the envelope, frankly. And you know what? On some level, I'm disappointed. Like, there were definitely a few people who participated, and there were so many more who were like, oh, I want to participate, and then didn't. And of course, it's a lesson for me in thinking about, so for the folks who messaged me saying, this is for Thai Contagion, right? For the folks who messaged me saying like, hey, can you drop me that video so I can build on it. I want to participate in this. And then, didn't end up getting in touch again. I mean, is it like, as creators, right? Like we get nervous putting our stuff out there. Is it that sort of vulnerability and sort of fear of what other people will think? You could, of course, just be running out of time or having other obligations and stuff, but still like, like, I guess like, I don't want to downplay like the struggle of trying to build in these spaces. Like, it's not just about like, oh, certain kinds of people are perpetually online and certain kinds of people aren't. It's also about what kinds of media we are willing to sort of put out there, because it's also about putting ourselves out there. And like, I think it's, I would love to have like some nuance around that, and like, both like showing that like, okay, so sometimes you'll do something and maybe not a lot of people will take you up on that. And like thank you, Mazain, for bringing it up, because there's a level on which I feel embarrassment and shame. Like, again, so grateful to those who did participate. And I mean, actually, there were people who were not in the Taiko community who I met through protest spaces in the summer of 2020, who like, months later, they did end up participating and posting with me, I think that's super cool. So yeah, it's just, there's just a lot to this, I guess. And I think that, like in terms of what exists and what doesn't, in many ways, like, sometimes when it doesn't exist, you have to build it yourself, and then like face the feelings of maybe I'm not on the right track. Like maybe nobody wants this. Why did I even do this? I'm such a loser. Right. And like, that's what it feels like to be a pioneer, that in our own way, at least, especially in these digital realms. And I also just want to say, one of the most influential to me, like the original Taiko vlogger, like who was out there posting videos. I don't remember whether it was through YouTube or through a blog, maybe both. But so our good friend, Carrie Alita Carter, who has a presence known as All Things Taiko, to me is also like, this person is a Black trans non-binary person. We had the great pleasure of flying Carrie out here in February for an event that we did together, and Manman collaborates with Carrie a lot too. So yeah, I just want to say like someone like Carrie, can be putting all this content out there and then not getting the appreciation it deserves. And it just makes you want to melt into the floor and you feel like nobody knows and nobody cares. And for me, it was, I don't know, great to finally be able to like I didn't realize how much Carrie didn't know, at least how much I appreciated those resources. But yeah, like that was something that we got to have a talk about in person. And but it's now, just because I appreciated it doesn't mean everyone did. Absolutely not, right? Otherwise we'd feel differently about these things. But like sometimes people just assume that if you build it, they will come. And I just want to put out there that it's more than that, especially when we're talking about, multiple forms of minoritization, marginalization, so yeah.
For the sake of framework, it's worth pointing out that a lot of what I specifically use this platform for very much leans into nuance. And the way I hope to achieve that is by helping people connect the dots and stuff. And the virtue of, the platform I use being online, and that's just me using lingo here, when I say chronically online, but truth be told, the statistics online, right? TikTok alone has a user base of over 2 billion people, and each of these people consume over 10 hours of content every day on this app. So what that tells me is that whether humanity likes it or not, adaptation is necessary. And I've spoken with a lot of parents too, as well, about these sort of things and how there seems to be an alienation of interest when it comes to what their children care about versus what they would themselves care about, because it's the classic back in my day kind of talk, right? Back in my day, we didn't play games all day. Back in my day, we didn't, meet strangers on the internet and so on and so forth. But if you look closer and you start to pay attention, you'll start to figure out that actually in this current era, people are introduced to a lot of things, helpful things, life-changing things. And I pinned one as an example a few minutes ago where the video game Genshin Impact, and this is, based on my ongoing research, has featured a notable Taiko Kodo, if I remember correctly. And this current video that it's featured on has over 4 million views, and it was posted a year ago. So this is what I mean when I say, like, how do you collectively as a trio account and perhaps consider for when it comes to reaching people online versus reaching people IRL? Because obviously reaching people IRL will be much more difficult in some capacity, especially when it comes to attendance. But I do think that in terms of allowing the space for people to actually discover things, and having them do so in a way that's not exactly pitched in a certain way, I think it's ideal. And in this case, yeah, Genshin Impact is a very popular video game, but in no way the video in question is telling people, hey, by the way, the game is available on iOS, please download it. I feel like it's a little bit heavy-handed and kind of misses the point when it comes to introducing people to potential new aspects that they may or may not be familiar with. I did see, was it Marmonda had their hand up earlier, so I'll pitch it back to them.
I I had my hands up earlier. Kind of want to jump on what Sassen was saying earlier. but I'm also now processing what you just said, Tony. So I'm kind of losing a little bit of my train of thought. Um, um, yeah, well, I'll circle back to finish that thought that I want to share was, yeah, that's when Carrie, um, I would like to say that my entire Taiko career, like, wouldn't have been possible without the internet, literally, seriously. And Carrie was one of my first Taiko teacher we met in Hong Kong. And Carrie, like, I mean, we like having, and I'm talking about the time like in 2010, 2011, the Taiko group that I played in Hong Kong, we didn't have teachers. Like, well, before Carrie Carter and Heidi Chen joined us, but those two are very experienced Taiko players and teachers and composers. And before them, the group entirely relied on looking at whatever they can find online. But at the time, there weren't as like there weren't that many resources readily available to look up. So it was very, very limited. And then with like meeting Carrie, and Carrie, like Sasa mentioned, was one of the blogger, the very first, maybe the Taiko blogger that share resources. And fast forward many years, like because of that starting point, I immigrated to the US, and through the like social media and internet, I was able to connect. I joined at the time, the movement was called Women in Taiko. Now the movement is called Taiko Margins and Solidarity. And with that, like community and network, like through like in-person meeting plus continuing on through virtually social media, like to stay connected, I was able to like find gigs and like travel to Europe to teach workshops, and also kind of keep expanding and being a part of the movement. And yeah, so just wanted to add that thoughts in terms of like like a broader pictures of how like yeah, definitely resonate with what's been said. And not just Taiko too. Like I am autistic. I have selective mutism, or I prefer the name situation mutism, and I also have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And through social media, I learned so much like that, able to support, like find ways to make my life just less painful. And I myself also recognizing so much of what I do with Taiko, the art form, and also with what MDF, the three of us as trio, are offering. Like as a like we don't necessarily say that out often, but it's definitely true around the three of us when we like share space, is how do we uplift neurodivergence existence and ways of being, ways of interacting, ways of communicating. How do we prioritize those kind of needs? Yeah. So that was just me wanting to add that, but I also noticed that maybe we could move on to a different topic.
Yeah, I was actually about to follow that up with the live sessions that you folks do. What's the average length of these training sessions or these teaching sessions, and what are the typical expectations that are being set? And what are the pros and cons when it comes to getting someone new involved into this discipline? anyone can take this on if they're happy to do so.
I guess I'll start. I'm sorry, I'll turn off my AC. Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll let others jump in soon, but I guess like in terms of time, it can really vary. So like we've done workshops that are like as short as an hour, but then we also have like experience with kind of longer. What the term we typically use are like intensives. So there are some things where it's like, oh, it's kind of like a like more than 4-hour thing with like breaks in between. And I think there's like with a lot of the topics we cover in our instruction, we have a lot of flexibility in terms of adjusting like, okay, how deep does someone want to go? How much time does someone have? What is someone's starting point? Because I guess to the point about like someone new, like someone like I'm not sure, and maybe others can contradict me or jump in. I don't have like a generalized conception of a like new to Taiko person. I mean, are people coming in, with dance experience? Are people coming in with and what kind of dance experience? Are people coming in with like other kinds of music experience? And how is that informing, things that might be more worth tapping into, or like differences that are worth focusing on and emphasizing? So I guess that's like my very like initial surface level answer.
Yeah, I could jump in here. Just for context for folks who are not familiar at all with like how a live session with Taiko could go. So there are a lot of Taiko groups. In general, like, well, for example, where we based in LA, there are a lot of Taiko groups. And then we're about to go on tour to connect with the many different cities that also have existing Taiko group. So when in terms of those, like sometimes like Taiko group will, because the drums are very loud and very heavy, so normally like people who are new to this are not expected to buy your own instruments and or bring your own equipment. They usually have existing equipment that folks could borrow, and we as instructor are also I'm very used to just going into a space like working with like existing group who established like have their own space, or either they collaborate with other venues to borrow or rent the space, or if they have nowadays there are more and more well established group that owns their own space as well. But then like design, but this is more like the general practice. Like there are workshops or ongoing classes that people can sign up to. And because of the pandemic, like there are also multiple groups and spaces that are starting offering hybrid. Like I myself personally have taught many hybrid or online classes where people find things that they could set up at home, because Taiko is a very heavily it's very physical, body movement driven. Sometimes as beginners, like teaching beginners, we will spend majority of the time just to get used to how to stand, how to hold the drumsticks, how to move without even getting to hit the drums. So, and there's so much knowledge and so much practice involved, like that is really valuable. Actually, stepping away from the drums to practice that is very important as part of the practice. So because of that, like it allows us to sometimes offer classes to both beginners or very experienced players, like without the drums. And that is something that what the three of us are heavily invested in, like in terms of body care, body awareness, movement, creativity, and even just within ourselves as artists, when we compose or we practice or teach each other songs, sometimes we don't necessarily use drums as well because there's so much that we could work on. Like we could do it at a park, we could do it at like just outside somewhere that we could be loud and move around. Or sometimes loud, we can't be loud. We could like we also could work in tight space, just use our voices to sing rhythms. Because unlike many typical or what is being dominating in the music educator world, like using notation to learn, like her learning to read, Taiko arts actually utilize vocalization, singing mnemonics, and also sometimes we do use like different forms of notation. There's a little more diversity, flexibility in like individuals either creating their own notation or groups of people sort of exploring their own way of notating. So yeah, so this is just like me trying to kind of explain like because the art form itself is so diverse. So yeah, this is just like maybe a little part, hopefully give a little sense of what that could look like as a practice. Sasan, you want to jump in?
Yeah. I've been frantically looking around my various friends' Twitter to see if we ever posted any photos of the times when we were like taking old car tires and using packing tape to make drum heads out of them and setting them on chairs so that we could have these pretend like practice taiko to play on, because it's such a common thing, whether you're in a taiko hub or not. Like a lot of what we do, there's a lot of very humble origins here. And honestly, I have a tire that I use in my space right now too. Like, so yeah, it may not be like exactly what a lot of other people picture, but one thing that I love about working with Munmun and Mazain is that, like, together we have facilitated spaces where absolute beginners, can be up and drumming and singing, and learning short dances and so on with us in minutes. The dancing might take a little longer sometimes, but sometimes not. Actually, in spaces, I'm thinking of an art project that we did to remember those who've been lost in Los Angeles to police excessive use of force, those who've lost their lives at the hands of the police, and beautiful memorial that we did honoring each and every person for like in the past 10 years or whatever. And as part of that, we performed a piece that has a community dance associated with it, and pretty much, nearly in real time taught that dance so that people who've never even necessarily done this kind of dance before can participate. And I bring this up because one of the things that's so important to me, like, yes, as an educator, like, I can get real deep, like lots of technique. Yes, we can go there. And I do have a lot, personally to add about that too. Like, because I also personally bring a science and technology of learning, because like my background is in electrical engineering, and artificial intelligence sorts of stuff, computer science and so on, as well as neuroscience and psychology. I'm just obsessed with learning and sensory processing, especially vision, but also like motor consequences of that. I'm just decision making, like the whole nine, just all of it, that whole pipeline. So I think about learning a lot, in so many different professional contexts. And one thing that I have done is I've developed a workshop series that I'd intended to be delivered as a 6-session, 2 hours each series. And then the pandemic happened. And so I did end up delivering the first such session, and that's available on my YouTube for free to, give a taste of that. But basically, like, sometimes like without enough interest in it, it's difficult. Like it's not like feasible to just get the resources together, get us to rent a space and have drums and be able to do the full workshop. Um, so yeah, there's basically just trying to say that like there's a lot of different things that you can be learning, and some of it can be very detailed. But it is really important to me to recognize that so much of what we're doing, and also just so much of like how communities have built the arts over time, has been just completely different from a lot of the like kind of modern or Western style expectations, and sort of who and what is valued. It's not just Western society, to be fair. Like it is also the case that, I mean, like arts patronage has historically created, those who were favored and those who were not. And, like these days we seek audiences on TikTok perhaps. And, before they were seeking audiences with aristocrats and royalty, whoever had, the resources to be able to support art making. So that's definitely a thing, but community art making and getting people going really quickly, these are both important to us. And so I think that's part of why we're giving such wildly varying answers of like, oh yeah, that'll be 10 years of hard work, please. Right. In addition to like, oh, you can borrow our drumsticks. Like, let's go right now. You're fine. Right. Because both are really valid, and also both are really important. And I think just given that our society like often acts like that latter thing, like the thing where you don't have to be some sort of virtuoso in order to participate, in order to to perform, and yeah, like it shouldn't be the case that like, oh, you have to be good, otherwise you shouldn't be seen. Like that's something that I'm really consciously pushing back on. So, so I just want to make clear that like, that if you want to really, really get into it, we can really, really get into it with you. And if you're not, and if you're not sure, like we can absolutely work with you to, figure it out and come up with something that, because like at the end of the day, we want to get you excited about this. Not just because the drums are amazing and because of sort of what they represent, sure, but also because like this is a way to connect with something. And whether you're JA or not, Japanese American or not, or part of the diaspora or not, and frankly, none of us are. But like, there's so much more that one can be motivated to delve into. That like we aren't just, it's not just about the technique. It's important in our community to also be building understanding and getting people, like just finding allies, building solidarity together, getting people to understand and think about like the ongoing harms of Japanese incarceration, ongoing harms of anti-Asian hate, and also for people to think about how that dovetails into other forms of systemic injustice, anti-Blackness, and so on. How there has been communities divided and conquered. Like we see these things as related. So, yeah.
An aspect of music that I'm personally interested in hearing your folks' take on is Western notation versus Eastern notation, because a lot of the music communities that you see online are predominantly in self-taught communities, not so much in classically trained ones. On Reddit in particular, if you hover around circles of music producers or music composers, this idea of music theory is very elusive to a lot of them. Even on YouTube, when it comes to tutorials, there's a common understanding that you don't want to beat people over the head when it comes to Western notation because it can be complex or just boring, truth be told. So, yeah, notation in Western versus Eastern, like as applied to Taiko, which would you consider to be the easiest to get into?
I'll start on this one if that's okay. Yeah, I have very, very strong feelings about this as someone who grew up in like a quote unquote Western music education. Was forced to learn and read Western notation and absolutely hated it. I was very much a person who preferred to learn by ear. And but there was never it was the thing that I was expected to do, and there was never any other option. Whereas like at least in the programs that I was in, the idea of learning how to play by ear was like it was almost considered like an elective, or like it was like an optional skill. It was like that's the 201 level course. You can't First you have to focus on reading this very particular notation. And I think it really like for a while I just thought, there's this like kind of essentializing thing that I think happens that I tend to agree with less and less these days of like, oh, I'm just not a visual learner. I'm an auditory learner. Some people are visual learners. And I think it was through exposure to, first and foremost, coming to Taiko where primarily we teach through something called Kuchi Shoga. And more of us can delve into the meaning and the depths of Kuchi Shoga. But it's a vocalized oral way of transmitting and reciting and teaching the rhythms that we play. So for me, that was just, I came to my first Taiko practice and they were like, we use this system to teach music orally. And I was just like, okay, I'm sold. Because I thought, I'm an auditory learner. But as I like went further on in my Taiko journey and I saw other forms of like Taiko written notation that used the same Kuji Shoga, but written, for example, Edo Bayashi for Tokyo Edo Festival music. There's written notation, but the way the written notation was laid out just worked so much better for the music I was learning that I started to be like, it's not that anything that's written down is like horrible. It's not like, what is it, that like Socrates of like writing will be the downfall of our education or anything like that. Like we do notate our pieces using Kuji Shoga, either handwritten or, increasingly in things like spreadsheets. But Western music notation is just not good at everything. And I think that's part of the problem of white supremacy and, white Western hegemony is this idea of like the universal, the white Western modes of representation being universal and good at everything. It's horrible if you look at Western notation, like two different lines to see how things are rhythmically aligned and how they fit in between each other. It's just, it's horrible. And I find myself like having to do all this like pre-processing of like, okay, if it's melodic, I have to count how many little hashtags there are on each line. And especially things being laid out like in this like online, offline, it really like makes me have to squint. And then also combined with the expectation of sight reading, like this idea that one of the goals is to have something thrown in front of you and you just like stream process it. I'm just really not a fan of, and I feel like the way we like teach, the way we communicate the way we practice in Taiko, like in ways allows us to build this deeper relationship with the piece, that I don't think is impossible in Western music, but certainly the practice of sight reading, I feel detracts from that. So also the whole conversation about ableism and like, yeah, there's like something like, I know like for particular neurodiverse artists, but not just neurodiverse artists who have particular like synesthesia, where things like certain colors help them associate to certain pitches or certain rhythms. And yeah, that doesn't, in my experience, easily, I'll speak for myself, for me, it doesn't easily translate to like, here's a dot, is it filled in or not? Is there a little tiny dot next to it on these lines? Okay, that's been my rant. I'll pass it up to someone else.
Thank you, Ms. And I definitely want to jump in next. As I was listening, I was also looking for the link of from our MDF YouTube channel where we did the Kuchishoga body percussion thing that we could share, because as I referenced, I also have a lot of thoughts and feelings when it comes to this topic. Just a little background is that I similar to Mazain, I also grew up having classical music training. Well, to be specific, classical, the word classical is not very inclusive. It's Western European 18th century classical music training. I growing up in Hong Kong, I play piano and I complete all the Royal School grade 1 through 8 music, piano music examination and music theory, and then I ended up I also have a musicology undergraduate and postgraduate degree. I'm still in musicology. So after me like going through, I even also took public exam, cert level and advanced level music as well. And going through that system, I basically have to survive through that system, and I use the word survive because like at the time I thought that's the only way of making music, as in learning how to read, learning how to sight read, staff notation, learning how to play, and like doing basically all the training is centered, like it's surrounding like being able to read, and all the other things being put as less important. But then like at the same time they also expect you being able to. So like just years and years of like believing that, oh, I'm not good enough to be a music professional, to be a musician. I even have my piano teacher at the time, when I told her I want to study music for higher education, and she told me she doesn't think I have what it takes to be a musician. And I truly believed that at the time. That's why I chose musicology instead. And during being in the undergraduate program in University of Hong Kong, I had the opportunity to study in Bali. I played Balinese gamelan gongkyo biak for a couple of years, and I visited Bali to as part of the course, and that was my first exposure of learning music in a way that's other than reading, staff notation. And that's the first time ever that I'm able basically realize that, hey, I am good at this. I can be good at this. It's just that I haven't been given the right tools. And again, not to sort of like degrade like the staff music like notation system. I think there are beauty in it. And having actually studied like European music, I do believe that there are so much definite beauty in it. But at the same time, what I'm speaking to is that when it's being presented as the only valuable system. And so many artists, very, very talented artists, in order for them to be successful, they like everybody has to prove that they can like do great music. And it's really unfortunate and it's really traumatizing. And 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 to sort of uplift and highlight how Taiko provide a different possibility. Like, and also I do also want to kind of push back a little bit of that binary, Western and Eastern notation. Like as someone who, like, because of my musicology background, I have an opportunity to study many different forms of notation. And there are just so many ways of notating. And they all, and basically when notating something, the purpose of that is to communicate the music, is to basically like, hey, here's something someone create. How can I communicate that to get other people involved? And basically transcribing these ideas. And because music is so multidimensional, there's sound, there's movement, there's multi-layers of sounds happening at the same time, and there's also technique translating, like transcribing how are you playing that instruments, and sometimes some are in time, some are not in time, and to what extent are you being playing in time with. And there are just so many different ways, because there could be drawing that indicate the movement, like for example like tablature that indicate how you move your hand gestures, and there's also lines and space that like decide like what kind of time that we are in agreement on. And or even there's numbers to indicate this is the notes that we're playing, or like mnemonics to indicate this is the sound that we're attempting to create. And so there were Taiko sort of like, say, the Kuchi Shoga that we mentioned earlier is basically singing the mnemonics. And the word Kuchi means mouth. Shoga, if we look at the character, Sho means sing, but when you look at the character, that has many mouths. So sing, the concept of sing means there are lots of people using their mouth singing together. And singing is not a solo thing, it's a community thing. Ga, sho, ga, the word means song. So if you just literally translate that, it means mouth sing song. But then if you look at the word ga, there are mouths, there are legs, there are people dancing, there's dancing, and also if you look at an older version of ga, also means like you can see the shape of a person like kneeling, praying. So in certain like East Asian culture and historical context, singing, dancing is considered a part of spiritual experience. That's part of like praying, connection to nature and God, so to say. And so I like to interpret that as Kuchi Shoga means not just using your voice, vocalizing the music, but it's also embodying. It involves movement. So Kuchi Shoga, often when you see Taiko practice, it's like you will learn to say a phrase in time and also imitating the tone of the drums that you're creating. And at the same time, we also do it with gestures and movement to mimic like how are we gonna play that on the drums. And so this is one example of like many Taiko practitioners use Kuchi Shoga. But there's also Kuchi Shoga that involves, like, for example, from Edo Bayashi, which is the historic Tokyo festival of music. And in Edo Bayashi, there are like systemically sort of recognized like notation and Kuchi Shoga for both the drum and the flute, the bamboo flute, and also the handheld metal gong. and each instrument has their own sets of kuchishoga. And there is also like the way how they notate it is like it's like sort of have been over the years have been come to like being standardized, and so there's like a more extended more existing kind of body of work that's more standardized compared to like the group ensemble drumming kushoga that I'm kind of comparing to. And of course there are so many more in between too. And not to say that like Taiko people don't use staff notation, like because we do live in a world that people like do use that as well. Yeah, this is a really big topic that I think the three of us kind of have a lot of discussion on, so we could go on and on and on and on. So, but I'm gonna pause here. Yeah, thanks, Sassen, go for it.
Yeah. Thanks, Manman. I also wanted to highlight a really cool thing that Manman does a lot of in terms of teaching and communicating and breaking down rhythms, and also, polyrhythms when you have like musical phrases that are different lengths looped over each other. So you get like different relationship. It's really cool, right? And also just like complexly interlocking things is that Manman uses a lot of embodiment. So taking your rhythm and then figuring out how to choreograph it and play it on your body is body percussion. So that's something I know Manman had mentioned. I just sent Manman that link for a video if you want to tweet it and post it. But yeah, so for myself, I don't read Western notation too well. I haven't really put the energy into it, with the exception of in college being in a handbell ensemble. So I was playing the highest note. So I had two handbells in perpendicular directions in each hand. So I could play 4 notes as part of this ensemble. So I only had to read at most 4 lines of sheet music at a time. And, we were mostly playing like, carols and, like cute little songs. And it was easy enough for me to memorize anyway. But yeah, that's like the most sheet music reading, especially for pitched instruments, that I've really had to do. Especially because as a dancer and actor, honestly, like I was expected to learn my material by heart. And of course, improvise on my own when asked to do so. But so, for me, the concept of like, oh, the music is right there for you. Like I understand that it has its place, but it's something that, and in general, my identity as a musician is something that I really had to kind of struggle with and grow into. And actually, I think that that difference is something that's probably part of why we have in our society here like such a strong expectation of like music goes over here, dance goes over there, those are different, or acting goes over there, those are different. When really I think all these things are a lot more interconnected. But I mean, I'm just bringing that up because like, when people say folks who are, have a great background in different kinds of Western drumming or other kinds of Western notation, come into a space and are learning Taiko, like sometimes they get pretty frustrated at the fact that we don't do music stands and page turning and sight reading. Also, your hands are kind of busy with drumsticks in them, so who's going to turn the page, right? So, yeah, we're closer to, I'd say, the dance expectation of you're expected to learn and remember when it's a style or a piece that needs to be remembered. So, and that being said, when I first started learning Taiko, I was taught by a dancer. That was my first sensei. But I did start a Kuchishoga notebook because I wanted to be able to kind of remember and practice on my own. And so I would just like, even though it's taught orally, like there'll be, let's be concrete. So it's kind of like, scat as well. Like there's a lot of musical traditions that use this. So for instance, a hit to the center of a drum, it's something really resonant, right? It'll be like don or something. So I'll write down D-O-N, right? Whereas hitting a rim of a drum, which will make like a sharp wooden sound, right? That's going to have like a high pitch kind of thing. So it's ka, like that. And so we are taught rhythms, things like don kara, kara kara. Like that's how our rhythms are expressed. So we've been talking about singing Kuchishoga the whole time. That's what we're talking about. Stuff like that. Like based on what I just sang, like not just my friends here in this group, but people all over the country and all over the world who are familiar with that notation can just do it immediately. So it's really powerful in that sense. But still, as you're learning, you tend to want to have to write things down. And so, yeah, so people do create their own kinds of notation like that. And honestly, you learn a lot trying to make up your own notation. A lot of people use spreadsheets, and that's a great way also to be able to like just link it and share it with someone else. But that being said, a lot of the stuff that we do also has a lot of dance and movement incorporated into it too, right? Which, yeah, like, so people have different ways of trying to notate that. Like, one of our mentors actually came up with a whole Kuchishoga periodic table because, even beyond like the already complex and nuanced system of Kuchishoga to communicate rhythms, still, like, as the art form progresses, like, we figure out like new and different ways to hit the drum, like different parts of the skin, and make interesting different sounds with different physics games that you can play with these instruments, different ways you can hit things. And so like this is an area of active, artistic research. And people will like write Kuchishoga, and then like, if they're working with a spreadsheet, like highlight different cells, different colors, or have different ways to indicate what's going on. Like, okay, twirl your stick this way, or like step out here, or whatever. And other people will like have little notation that they're drawing, either in whatever notation making layout program that they're doing, or in their own notebooks. We have a lot of handwritten notation that we photocopy, or that, these days we scan or take a photo of and send each other. So that's a common way that things get passed around. But like, yeah, like no one representation may really capture everything. But I think one of the reasons like we've really stuck with Kuchishoga a lot, both in terms of that's how we were taught, and like it's an important aspect of culture, but also it lets us like as directors and instructors, it lets us correct people before they've even touched an instrument. Like, we can tell from how they're singing what we've just taught in words. We can tell like, oh, there's going to be an issue, and we can have a lot of things worked out. Like we said earlier, we don't need drums for everything. This is one of the reasons, actually. We have a saying in the community, if depending on who you hear it from, like either if you can say it, you can play it. Though maybe a bit more realistically, if you can't say it, you can't play it, which is, I think, a lot more often true. So now, that being said, I was actually raised with Bengali music, Bengali dance, and also Bharatanatyam, South Indian classical dance. And so all of these use different kinds of verbalized notations, a lot like Kuchishoga, but it's, called something different. And like, yeah, so we use that to communicate about music. So dancers actually have to learn it too, because like the tabla, like different kinds of drums will be accompanying their dance. And so that's like part of how we count our music. And just overall, in terms of like when we're talking about the specific kind of Western notation, yes, like no shade on tablature and other things that, are really well suited to the art making in that art form. But yes, we're railing against staff notation at the moment, right? That, yeah, a lot of like different ways of representing things. So instead of like keys and the way that time signatures are laid out, we also, we have tal, different ways of representing like South Asian rhythms, and rags instead of keys. So representing like ideas about melodically, what sort of rules, compositional rules you might want to have, and what's going to sound good together versus what's going to sound a bit modern and chaotic. So yeah, again, like what we're doing is learning, through the formats, like learning, from the people who are working with these art forms. And and then I think it's best to, to sort of document and also to be, preserving that way, at least as a baseline, because there's a lot of wisdom baked into these choices. Like not everything that is shiny and modern is great. And so I think when we talk um, about the hegemony of certain cultures, it's just the point that nothing that we're talking about is like culturally backwards or um, non-technologically advanced or something. Like, I don't think that's necessarily the best way to be thinking about it. And in terms of the work we've had to do to liberate ourselves from internalized oppression, that's very much it. Like, that has been like part of what we're tackling as we study this, and that it's a way in which I think like doing these kinds of arts, like studying these things has and performing them and composing and innovating in these spaces has for, at least for me, it's been really helpful for like anti-oppression and liberation work I need to do, even like for myself. Like, and to be clear, I'm just talking about how like sometimes oppressive pressures are so bad that like for your own community, like you hate your own community. You think it's not good enough, and other things that are more dominant, uh, like are valued. And so this is part of how we like. It's not just value it because we say so. It's value it because actually it is better for the purpose. And so this idea that a staff notation is one size fits all is just completely incorrect. And I also say that having composed Taiko pieces that, I've tried a lot of different notations for, and pretty quickly ran into some limitations with Western music. And I think like we've all been, the three of us have all had that experience, which is, I think, one of these reasons that, sometimes we'd rather just whip out graph paper, get out a whiteboard and draw dots on the board or something. And sometimes that's the best way to communicate it. So I know Man might have to leave soon, so just want to allow for that.
Yeah. So as far as the techniques and the methods in which you folks use to teach people, what I'm as far as I'm aware, a lot of it is physical, right? And but also quite a lot of it is mental. And I was curious to know, since you folks are about to head on tour and stuff like that, how much of your training in Taiko do you think has prepared you for the adversities ahead when it comes to touring?
I just want to quickly say that a lot of traveling, crashing on couches of really generous people, and so on, like, has been a part of my Taiko training journey too. So yeah, I think I don't know. I'm excited. It feels like old times in a way. There's aspects like even amongst the three of us, we've had different sets of experiences um, with this kind of thing. But I guess kind of going to the beginning of your question about like different things that we're bringing to the table in terms of teaching and how we're bringing that on tour. Um, I'm almost done with this, but putting together a video, like a 5 minutes or less video addressing this exact thing, and it does also talk about notation and anti-colonial, like anti-assimilation, like intentional choices and things. Also ways in which I'm integrating, like we're integrating things from our backgrounds that many people would look at and say like, oh, that's not Taiko. And so we've got some more explanation of that coming up. But one thing I just want to highlight that I haven't mentioned before is like that that I really like doing warm-ups with people to begin our workshops that are drawing on like warm-ups that I've done in various parts of the dance world. Um, like turning on some cool music and doing your warm-ups to that. There's a method to this. And I think there's something really specific um that can help with, and that especially like helps break down some of these barriers between our ideals of what is music and what is dance and what am I going to be expected to do. Like on some level, if you want to get better at movement, then let's train in movement. And so we are doing that. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and to sort of jumping on like what Sasson said about like the like part of the training is like couch surfing. Um it's like something that for those who are not familiar with the Taiko community, um there's one thing that I certainly really love about the Taiko community. When we say the Taiko community, it's like a global community that it's most people who are part of this community are very generous. Um and actually um like so many Taiko artists like being able to travel and and like one like I like mentioned earlier that this like especially the North American Taiko community, it's like very um generous in terms of sharing resources, and sometimes like I didn't realize that it might be really something very specific to the North American Taiko community, and now also the European Taiko community, that a lot of people like sharing their home to host artists, and to make like workshops happening possible. And to be honest, one of the biggest I'm super anxious about this trip is this will be the first time uh for me to drive on some road trip for this long. And as an immigrant, I have never been or even familiar with um the art of the rest of the United States. And and as an Asian person, I'm also feeling a lot of anxiety of like visiting different states that I'm not familiar with or only learn about them, unfortunately, through like news and about politics. And it's kind of distressing to just even imagining myself like being in those spaces. But then as putting this tour together, knowing that there's a type of community out there, even though some of these people maybe I'm meeting for the very first time in person, but there's also that part of like knowing, okay, I think I could do this. Like just going to someone's home, like yeah, like it's like and to be honest, just to think about how I moved like to this country really based on that what I seen in the first place of a community spirit. And therefore I have to trust to like, you know what, I'm gonna just dive in. I'm gonna come here and see what happened. And yeah, like it's interesting. I like this, and you call that's part of the training and part of practice, which I do agree and resonate. Miss Anne, would you like to?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess in terms of like the training to prepare for this tour, I guess what like in terms of how we've prepared and how our practices have prepared us for this tour, I think the ways in which we support each other is really, really important. So like, for example, something that like we've said to each other, and like I've been grateful when Mom and Sasson have reminded me of, is like, oh, like making sure you like are able to, like after we've been working on something for a long time, make sure that you eat. That's also part of your Taiko practice. And to me, it's like, if I were to like really, really go off on a tangent, it could lead to this whole like anti-Descartes rant about like, you know, the mental is the physical, like we exist with, like our mind is in our body, we exist with our united entity, like to like break down that like mental physical binary a little bit, which I see like, to me, I like perceive even in ways that I used to think about Taiko in terms of like a like movement and like music split. I think has often mapped onto like that mind body duality. But yeah, I think that kind of, for lack of a better word, holisticness of our practice, I think is something that's going to prepare us and serve us really well and provide us with, you know, the resiliency to go into some of these spaces. Like, for example, we're planning at some point on traveling through and staying in Montana as part of our path to get over to the West Coast as part of our, you know, the return trip from the Twin Cities, that leg of the tour. And you know, in a lot of places, you know, Montana, along with like, you know, Missouri and Florida, there's a lot of perfect things with respect to racism and trans antagonism happening legislatively in these parts of the country, but some of these, you know, really stand out. So I've been, you know, like the reality of reading about some of these things happening in Montana and then knowing that I'm going to go there, but knowing that I'm not alone, which was part of the formulation of this tour from the very beginning, was like, in order to confront my parents, in order to do this and go to, you know, some of these more hostile, not that how to frame it, some of these places where we feel more of the hostility and more of the isolation for various aspects of our identities, that we have each other. And that's how we keep us safe, as we so often say.
Yeah, go ahead, Justin.
Yeah, so I just wanted to try to make it clear like how big a deal this tour is, and frankly how like just how rare it is for artists like us to get a chance to do this. So you mentioned Kodo earlier in that Genshin Impact video. Like, let's be clear that Kodo, I mean, so Kodo is based in Japan. I mean, they're like, how do I explain what a big deal Kodo is? I mean, for one thing, they're such a big deal that they're well known outside the Taiko community. So that right there is a big one. But, you know, I mean, they've been touring internationally for decades and decades. I mean, like the programs that they've built and the yes, like huge respect for Kodo. And but like right, that's the point, is right now that it's only groups like that have, through their, you know, a lot of hard work and so on, like really built that. Though I will also add that like how this interacts with, again, like appetites for consumption and exotification, and how some of their material that they're bringing on tour in the West can often be, it can have some aspects that are a lot more exotifying and hypermasculine than even what they teach when you go visit them on Sado Island. And like, yeah, like I adore the founders of Kodo. Like, yeah, we're buddies, really. But like the thing is that like then how that's presented here and sort of what becomes popular. Yeah. Anyway, my point is, it's really rare and weird for a group that's like not Kodo to be attempting what we're doing right now. As for American groups, we've had a couple, again, like literally the biggest names in the game, the premier Taiko groups have been able to even do small tours. What we're doing is, to my knowledge, compared to, you know, in the 50 years, 55 years of typo history, approximately, that we've had in North America, if I'm doing my math right, what we're doing is a bit ridiculous. And there's a reason that we're able to do this. So one is that we have to do it to get Mazine's stuff, right? Like, our transness is forcing us into the situation. And so we're doing like the original idea to, hop from town to town, stay with people, and, make a little something on the side to be able to afford the gas, to be able to afford this trip. And at the time of the people who are going with Mazine to keep fare safe. And the second reason is because we have been really lucky and grateful. We're grateful to have been awarded a really nice grant from the single professional organization for our art form called the Taiko Community Alliance. Of which, like, I'm certainly a charter member. Like, yeah, we've been involved with that organization in different ways for many years, and it's amazing. Like, without them, we would not be able to be doing this. But, it's certainly not like enough to make everything magically be okay. But it was just an amazing sort of seed to turn this from funny idea into reality. So yeah, the fact that this is uncommon has two results. So one is that, it's not like there's a ton of people we can go talk to amongst our teachers. I mean, of course, some of our teachers do know a little bit about what this is like. But it's not like a lot more people in the Taiko community know how to run a 300 plus person weekend long conference than know how to try to do what we're doing. So, we have benefited from those who've come before us. Absolutely. Like reading the tour blogs of some of my favorite American Taiko groups, what they've been on tour in years past, has helped me know that it's possible, which is what gave me the idea to propose it to Mazine in the first place. So, but yeah, that again, with that sort of feeling like we're living on the edge thing. So, and yeah, I don't know, like I feel a little self-conscious, like someone might walk away thinking like, wow, these people have no idea what they're doing. And like, it's like, well, yeah. And also like, we can't afford to hire tour managers. Like, that is not the level of income we are making at all. We're making amounts of money that I think most musicians would, I don't even know if they would laugh or cry first. Like, I think like trans artists, I think it's more like amounts that some of us are used to getting, which is often nothing, and being expected to perform for exposure. And so it's really radical for us to demand anything even approaching, anything even close to what our worth is. And then the fact that we're also, going and doing this in places where there's less community support, less infrastructure already potentially for Asian folks, for trans non-binary folks. That like eats into that grant funding. So, it has to be sort of spent differently. So yeah. So yes, it's a lot of anxiety in a way, but it's also been a great motivator for us to do a lot of composition work. Mazine was talking about how we support each other. One of the things we're doing is that in preparation for this tour, like part of the, it's called Heimweh, expressing Mazine's homesickness. And actually, we have each been working on at least one, if not more, pieces about aspects of home, heritage, and family, and how our identities and how our stories have sometimes alienated us from those concepts that we wish we could have, and also sometimes brought us closer to it in ways. So different stories, I can't fully generalize, but basically we have pieces that speak to these themes that we're bringing on tour with us. And in addition, the exercises that we developed, and some which we borrowed from other creativity workshops, and also the people who have taught us to do what we're doing, we're bringing them and putting them together into our own I'm the special composition workshop tour where we're really trying to get people to make the art that they need to make. Like there really is art. Like, don't think that you're not good enough, because A, yes you are, and B, it's like the universe, the world, our communities need you, and yes, I do need you to make this art. It really, especially in these times when every single night there's like a new proposal or a new bill or a new ruling or something that is limiting our rights, and that is vilifying us for honestly some of these kinds of performance, and especially as trans people, like limiting our ability to exist in public life. There's a reason they're going after us, and it's because we do put the message into the medium. But all the more reason for us to be doing it, and to be doing it authentically. So a lot of folks are scared, and we get that. And this is what we mean by no, we're here to support these communities, because we all need to be sure to not just go along to get along, keep your head down, don't rock the boat. No. This is the time to be making art that makes people uncomfortable and helps remind them every day why we are in the fight, and gets more and more and more people to help make that revolution irresistible. That's the job of the artist, right? So yeah, we have a lot of really highfalutin goals. And if even like half of them happen, it's gonna be amazing. So, and I'm excited to be doing it with these folks and with our partners across the country.
So, lastly, I think it's important to touch upon, as some of you mentioned, the business side, and the effort that goes into building such a business model. Um, I'll preface this with some numbers to contextualize what I'm about to throw at y'all. So, currently, on the website Zipia, using a database of over 30 million profiles, there are just under 800,000 business owners that are considered so-called small business owners, right? So people that hire anywhere between 5 employees to 30. And the average age of an employed this small business owner is 44. And the most common ethnicity of such business owners would go as following: 60% white, 15% Latino or Hispanic, 6% Asian, and 6% Black and African American. In the retail industry, is the highest paying for business owners right now, as of 2021. And also as of 2021 as well, women earned 80%, 86% of what men have earned in that category. And that 10% of all these business owners that are considered small are LGBT. And when you pivot over to Billboard's site, in their recent coverage of touring numbers, as of 2022, from November 2021 to October 31st, 2022, touring has grossed just under $3 billion in ticket sales. So think of platforms such as Ticketmasters and other such similar platforms, and that has increased to 36% in 2019, when touring was still active before the pandemic shut everything down. So clearly there's a lot of business that goes into doing what you folks are doing. So what, as far as what you've learned from a business perspective, what are the insights, and more importantly, what can other people looking to follow in your footsteps, what can they learn from that process?
Manman, do you want to say something? And especially if you need to sign off soon, wanted to let you go first.
Sure. I'm so glad this question's being asked, like it's interesting, like within the Taiko community, even though they're like basically I could see that many groups or practitioners kind of fall into this category of small business or even self-employed individuals. Um, and it's interestingly that this topic is not being talked about often. And this topic is also something that the three of us do spend a lot of time self-taught learning and also try to make changes in sort of deconstructing how, like breaking the cycle of harm in many ways. Um, um, I trying to collect my thoughts because this is also like being a self-employed Taiko artist working for more than 10 years. It's such a huge learning curve, even though I have like experience of learning. Like I study accounting in high school and economic and business studies in high school, but it's just so bizarre that none of those knowledge prepared me to be a self-employed artist. And I'm only making some of these connections like recently and one thing that I'm really proud of MDF of like having accomplished is that like we try to educate ourselves as much as possible. And funny how that Sassen in Design like would come to me with a question and I answered like, oh, this is how I negotiate workshops. This is how I negotiate travel and all that stuff. And like because some of these I kind of just like there's no place to look up online how to be a taiko artist. I just ask some of my mentors, the good friends, like, what do you do? Someone asked me for a workshop, how do I make quotes? And like it's just learned by trial and error. And then only recently that I'm just taking some workshops for artists to learn about these strategy. And then the three of us kind of take some from my existing experience, from what we learn online, from what we question about the system and generating our own model and keep questioning it. And I often feel like more people need to know what we're doing with how we're generating, quote, how we're paying our like performers and how we're producing the shows and how we make sure we honor laborers being involved. And so many, like even in-kind labor or contribution needs to be recognized with its values. And that's when we start unpacking all this. All of a sudden, I finally could make use of these accounting knowledge that I really, by the way, I love accounting, but I never really make the connections until like recently, this last 5 years or so to see how that could apply. So I know probably I'm gonna pass like on to Sassen and Design to expand on this because I do have to sign off. I do want to express like thank you so much for having us and yeah, this is actually a really good practice for me personally to talk about like all this topic in a way to sort of open it up to a larger audience and not necessarily just within my own like community. So yeah, thank you so much for offering this space.
Cool. Bye, Man Man. So I wanted to sort of come back to those numbers you were talking about because it just makes me want to cry, right? I don't think I've ever seen, ever gone to a taiko show that, where the tickets are sold by like Ticketmaster or something. Every now and then there'll be like a brown paper bag tickets, like I don't even know if, not even really like Eventbrite sorts of things, maybe, I don't know. But basically like, I just feel like so much of what we're doing is just shut out of that economy, and that goes into like the fact that a lot of us, I mean, so many Taiko groups that I've been a part of, before I even moved to LA, I'd already been in like around the country. I'd already been in I think 7 or 8 groups at that point. Some of those might have been in LA because I was participating in LA groups before I moved here. But the point is that like have done a lot of performing with different groups in different parts of the country, different kinds of groups. Some are more community based, some are more professional. Um, you know, and regardless, like we're always like the group is contracted to play for so little. Also often for very little time, you know, it might be just a couple songs. Like, so you see us so much more at street fairs and stuff, which like, that's great. Like everything I've said about, you know, Taiko is meant to bring communities together. It's family friendly. It's great. We play at marathons to keep runners, give them energy, all these kinds of things. And like often, never mind money, they won't even list or promote the name of our group. They won't even give us the exposure. It's just Japanese drummers or Taiko, and it's like misspelled sometimes. Like, this is what we're talking about in terms of like it, and it does not matter if you are like really, really well-known American Taiko group, or my point is like not a touring Japanese group. Like just because also they have like totally different like paperwork and stuff to be dealing with. So yeah. Like for them, like, you know, yes, I've seen, you know, performances at symphony halls like Kodo and things like that. Universities will often host them. But yeah, like we're not going to be playing at House of Blues anytime soon. We're just not a part of that. And I feel like this is part of ways in which we are considered niche. And it's great that we can be, you know, doing a lot of community, like free pro bono work, supporting social justice movements, supporting cultural events, promoting understanding. It's great, but also we need to be paid. And it is ironic, and I mean, it's part of the marginalization that we're just expected to all be doing this on, you know, on the side for free. And this makes it like really rare to even find people like Manman who are, I mean, and at this point myself too, but Manman, you know, even more so, like who like their full-time gig is Taiko, teaching Taiko. Performing Taiko by itself is nobody's full-time gig in America, basically. Like we all have to teach, we all have to teach in order to get by. You know, getting work film scoring. We know some of our friends have been in groups that have a very small number of groups who have been a part of the Grammys and various other award ceremonies. And again, like they're just, it's like so often you get exotified, you know, so often you're somebody's backup, not singer, backup musician. And like, you know, put in some kind of like ninja looking mask and, you know, you're just there for your hands to hit the drums. And it's very dehumanizing, depersonalizing. So it's like the more we try to get access to like better funded things, the more we are put into deeply, deeply anti-Asian, like deeply appropriating and exotifying, compromising of our values situations. And it's disgusting. It's awful. And I am not mad at our Taiko pioneers. Like, I'm not mad at the previous generations for having done that. I'm not going to sit here and question their integrity, especially because it's so common. Like, these are actually things that we talk about at conferences because it makes people uncomfortable. And we need spaces to talk about it and try to heal together, or at least like figure out how to put up with it and keep going and not just throw our hands up in the air and give up. So another one of the harms from the fact that we are just so marginalized out of even the already exploitative music industry and dance and performing arts and theater industries in general is that like it means that we're even more likely to be paying people in ways that are incredibly unjust. Paying people as independent contractors when they're actually integral to your business, which California passed a law against that went into effect January 1st, 2020, I believe. But then because of lobbying, there's now exceptions that I guess like musicians and dance studios. I don't remember. Sorry, somebody else should double check on the current law. But I was disappointed to hear recently that those protections that I was so excited about that the California Assembly and that the legislature passed and that our Governor Newsom signed into law for 2020, it's gone. We don't even have those protections. I mean, as if people even follow the law and don't constantly do wage theft and constantly marginalize already vulnerable people. So in coming together, like we were just tired of being exploited. We're tired of being treated like dirt and for nothing. And when we're fighting with each other over scraps, there were times when some of us, I won't say who, but some of us in our group here weren't friends. And I would say that in part, like competition over limited resources, like fighting over a limited amount of scraps that were thrown is part of why. Because that's advantageous to us to be mean to each other. And obviously we have done a lot of healing. But that took explicit work. And that took intentionally saying, I'm not going to participate in the system. I see how this system is keeping us all down and holding me back in particular. And there's nothing I can do to keep my head down and be okay. I have to fight this system. And so when it comes to the business side of things, unfortunately, so looking into being able to like actually employ each other, like be a small business, we're not even a small business yet. I have actually just this week, as part of doing taxes and so on, I have looked into a lot of what it would take for us to be an LLC in California. And I have actually talked with it a little bit with our group, and we might be heading that way, honestly. But there are ongoing fees that are like what we would earn. Like it would take multiple gigs of like performing for no fee for us to be able to pay like some of the annual state fees. And that's putting all the money into that we're, I mean, basically like it would really be forcing us to operate at a loss unless we're able to do a lot more performances. So the ways in which, like when you're an independent contractor, and one was talking about self-employed, like, so part of what this means is that, yes, your taxes aren't being withheld. And it also means that the individual is going to have to pay basically what the employer and, somebody else would otherwise pay for Social Security, Medicare, and so on. Also, like you're not accruing, like you're not going to be able to get proper credit for these things to contribute to your own retirement, to be contributing to Social Security as well, because this is all done through, I mean, basically gig economy. Very, 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 very few Taiko people are like actually employed for what they're doing with like a proper W-2 and whatever. And so what Manman was referring to in terms of trying to at least have a conscience with this is that we are still, unfortunately, having to work with that independent contractor framework of how we are distributing funds amongst ourselves and how we each are going to have to go and pay a ton of this even small amount that we're getting in taxes. But what we're doing is when we are giving a quote to a client, we are, getting out our spreadsheets and calculating in advance, like, okay, we're going to need to be like this much of it is going to go to self-employment tax. This much of it is going to go to, to income tax. And like, I'm happy to be a taxpayer. I'm happy for social services. Like, I want those funds to be spent on making sure that our people can live with dignity, even a little bit. So I'm not trying to get out of paying taxes here. I would rather us do things like the proper legal way and be able to make visible these costs and pass them on to clients so that clients understand how much, bringing in artists, how much being a patron of the arts costs, so that then in your budgets for your events, you can properly negotiate for and get enough funding to actually pay your artists, so they don't have to keep committing labor law violations or things that violate the spirit of labor law. I'm sorry, loud cat. But yeah, so we are asking for a lot more money than we used to. And sometimes actually people just say, okay, which is fascinating. And I understand not everywhere can that happen, and not with every client. But when we get pushback, we start to talk about like, well, look, this is blah, 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 right? And then we mentioned before that, these drums cost thousands of dollars. These are some of the most expensive and also heavy and physically bulky equipment, especially if you want like, a lot of the like, big Taiko exciting stuff, right? Yeah, like if you want something that's like where it's bigger than the size of a drum kit, right? These are multi-$1,000 equipment, even if you're building them out of wine barrels. And we have amazing Taiko makers who do just that, who use that style of work, and it's still too much. And so we're having to rent, or we're having to borrow from other groups, and that's not easy. So there's just a lot of like, it is incredibly expensive to be doing what we're doing. Like, the point is that economically, like, we have this sense of small business, and we have an assumption that everybody would be able to be a small business, and then also once you are a small business, that you would actually be able to pay your workers. And it's not even just about the amount; it's also how they're being paid. And no, like, we're not. And it's rampant in the music industry. It's rampant in movement arts, dance studios, yoga studios, and the like. It's, rampant in the Taiko community. And we're offering even less, and we're expected, because we do so many events that are like Multicultural Day. Oh, we don't have so much money for that. We're expected to take just insulting amounts of money. And we do our best to like pay our teachers, so that they can have health care, so that they can take care of their aging parents. Like, that's part of how we pay into the community. And now as up and coming artists, we need that to be starting to apply to the up and coming, like, next generation of artists too, because right now the way that it is in the community is that people are, and it's a good thing that you're willing to support the Taiko pioneers, like earlier generations of people who made Taiko be what it is in North America. But the community falls apart if it can't support its next generation. And so please be picky. Like, we will bring our A game. Like, it's not that we're not good enough. It's just that there's an expectation that, well, we're not those people, and therefore we shouldn't be worth as much. And so there's just like a lot of mindsets to be shifting, and just an expectation that we need to be asking for more, and we need to build a practice of demanding more. Not to say that it's all on us, but I don't know how else to make progress on this. And so just how we support each other, how we support artists. It's like, especially as trans people, like, do you want people to be out on the street? So much of the mutual aid and community care that I see, especially in trans communities of color, even that is something that, in terms of paying artists, people could learn a lot from. And please understand that, like, when we talk about ticket sales, or even like what you're paying for a workshop or, a lesson, like, sometimes a lot of that is, taken by someone else, and the artist doesn't even get that. So, you can be a little choosy about, am I paying in a way that is going to allow the artist to get the most of the money that I'm putting in, right? That's an important question. And also, like, when I'm trying to bring an artist to something, which, thank you, we need that business. Please just understand that, like, we're not even really able to, like, we don't have a place that we can practice that we can afford right now. We don't. Some groups do, and that's great. But like right now, we don't have a residency. We're definitely looking. We don't have, it's really rough right now. And so sometimes when the rates might be higher than you expect, this is why, and this is barely chipping into even our rent money, never mind helping us pay for the immense amount that we have invested, in terms of, in terms of training in these art forms. So, and, valuing the original communities, going to Japan, and so on, that's not even the only place that has contributed in the long lineage of these kinds of drumming that we're enjoying today. So, and maybe this is something we could have a bigger panel on someday, Tony. I don't know what you think about that, but I think there's a lot more to be said here and a lot of change that we could be bringing. I think this is really important, and I'd love to have more time to really get into this and compare across what's going on in different art forms. I don't know what you think about that, but it would be great to, not Taiko specific. It would be great to be able to talk about this with a broader group of people, raise awareness of it, of, the just how ridiculous it is, so that people can understand how to participate in and how to support and how to sort of, build power together through the arts. Yeah.
Typically, for the record, a lot of what I use the Whiz platform for is very much aimed at documenting cultural arts and technology and the intersection between all of that. Business, without a doubt, falls right into this pile when it comes to, especially technology these days. There's more and more ways that people are starting to use and leverage as a way to build their businesses. Instagram being one of them. Chances are people that have accounts that are bigger than several tens of thousands are essentially their own independent small businesses, and same applies for YouTube channels that are, hundreds of thousands of subscribers in size. So it's definitely a lot that I'm personally savvy and very tapped into, that I suppose communities outside of that could benefit from, and I'd be happy to host that and help mediate it. But I do want to pass it on to Mazaim as well, too, in terms of, their thoughts on this whole affair.
Yeah, thanks. I guess the one thing I really wanted to kind of pick up on that Sasin mentioned was space. Space to practice Taiko is, it's not just, the ones that do exist are often expensive, but to dig a little deeper, there's just so much the way sound and certain kinds of sound is policed in this country. Not equal, particularly in my experiences here in LA and back in Minnesota. So many Taiko groups have to have practices. Sasin mentioned park practices, but a lot of them are have been in parking structures. And Sasin and I could both tell you stories about how that's led to, increased targeting from police, tickets, financial, these financial and personal risks. And even some of the pioneers who do have space, have to negotiate with their neighbors in terms of how many hours per week they're allowed to practice. And that's certainly been something that we've been running up against here in MDS. But one example that I'll give is in the USC Kazan Taiko Collegiate Group. We had a lot of the campus police were essentially 2 weeks before one of our spring concerts gave us a cease and desist on being able to practice in our parking structure. And we were able to move forward because our executive director really worked hard and reached out to some people in USC's music department, and we were able to come to an arrangement with the marching band, which has this wonderful indoor space where you're allowed to make noise and no one's going to come harass you. So I guess one thing I'd say is, if you're in a position where you are at an institution or organization where you have access to such a space and you have that kind of power, and you see particularly art forms that aren't part of the Western European cultural hegemony, that are getting harassed and denied spaces to practice, use, share that space. It's please, stand in or act in solidarity. And because as much as certain, institutions will want to pretend like it's a meritocracy and just whoever most deserves it gets access to the most space and resources, we know that's not true. It's just absolutely not. So yeah, again, I think this, like Sasson said, this topic about space and practice space could be a whole nother conversation on its own. But yeah, that was just the main point I had left.
Yeah, I for the first little while I was in LA, I was actually surprised at how little we were bothered, but it's been getting worse since the pandemic, which is extremely ironic. Because as like here, especially here in California, but just in general, one of the reasons why Taiko is associated with the civil rights movement here, and the fight for Asian studies and so on, is that that being seen taking up space doing something Asian, and especially something that kind of violates the stereotypes of being loud and Asian, it's seen as threatening, apparently. And it's fine if there's jackhammering. You can be in a public park. This is something that really happened to one of my friends who I used to practice with in Boston. And she's a lawyer too. So she's out in the park. It's not even a drum. It's a tire and a chair. And she's next to a fence in a baseball diamond. And she's practicing on her car tire practice drum. And there's jackhammering on the same street. And she got a noise complaint called in. And a police officer comes up and is like, you can't do that. I got a noise complaint for someone and their baby's having trouble sleeping. And my friend, who is a lawyer and who knows that city's noise statute, then quotes it back to the police officer, who is like, well, but if I'm just going to get another call. I have to, right? Cops being cops. And, she's not harming anyone, And, this is a white woman too. Look, okay? But just doing something that is, I guess, that far out of the norm, or kind of Western standards of behavior and expected. You don't even realize just how many expectations of what's normal and what's not. And what's, there's ableism in addition to, in addition to the racial aspect of it in here too, but what kinds of sound making and movement and how you use space, it's just, the whole thing is so policed. There was just this weekend, the three of us were there's a space where we do for fairly difficult to afford for us right now, fees. We are able to rehearse sometimes, which we're only able to do with support from a client for a particular show. So we had a rehearsal for that show in that space, and then we went outside and we were just, in a parking lot, and like we went to the parking lot, like right, that is literally connected to the parking lots that we're parked in to, to go to that rehearsal space. And this like weird alarm system that just starts yelling at us, like automatedly, like the cameras have detected, get out of the space, you evil intruder. I mean, it was so, okay. So we like run panicking from that. So I suggest, okay, there's this other space in this other business park. I've been there so many times. Again, no drums. We're just standing there waving our arms around and singing Kuchishoga and eating snacks and just being three little goody two shoes doing no harm. And a security guard comes up to us. I've been having meetings and so on in that little space. It's like a little lunch spot for employees in that business park and in that healthcare center area. It's not that anybody else was using it. It's just the security guard's like, well, I have to ask you to leave. This is private property. And that's the thing, is like, what's been going on with our values around music and how and where and who does it, I think is related to, and like who's allowed to participate in the economy, where you're allowed to do these things. Like even if you're practicing in a dance studio, I've known of groups practicing in dance studios getting noise complaints from across the street, even with like the subway system going across the street, and still there are people saying like, oh, there's drumming, it's too loud, tell them to stop. Like whether it's NIMBYism, not in my backyard, or just whatever it is, like some kind of xenophobia, like it creates a situation where like, like it's such a privilege for USC's group right now to be able to have access to the marching band space, even a little bit, because I'm like, there's so many Taiko groups who wonder what that's like to not be bothered. Because we have no idea. And again, we're not even practicing on our real drums a lot of the time in these situations. And even that is threatening and not okay and heavily policed. And so spaces that really have enough soundproofing. But yeah, I've practiced in like professional, like soundproofing, like musician studios, 24-hour studios. And it's not enough soundproofing for our drums. You can still hear us through the walls and stuff. So it's like, it's difficult to exist with what we're doing. I have been pleased that like certainly in terms of like regular everyday people, when we've practiced in parks, that's mostly gone well. My mom does have a really awful story about being attacked like as an Asian American in a park, unfortunately, with a lot of verbal abuse and threatening, intimidating behavior, but and that scares us out of the parks sometimes. So we're just constantly reminded of how what we're doing is, like, on one hand, like you said, yes, there's a lot of appetite for it, one would think, I mean, and also just in general, whenever people see Taiko, they're like, that was so cool. How do I get involved? And it's so hard for them to get involved because it's so hard for us to have spaces where we can teach, or spaces where we can rehearse and play so that people can see us at more things and we can have more Taiko groups. It's like this unending cycle of like, this is not something that should be included. This is too far. This is too much. This shouldn't be allowed. This is unreasonable. So sometimes it's more overt like that, and sometimes it's just subtle, where it's more of like an inaccessibility thing. There's a lot, again, as with so many of these things, a lot more that could be said about that. But like one of the so in North America, we recognize San Francisco Taiko Dojo as the first Taiko group, and its founder, as really like one of the first people to really just do so much to bring Taiko to North America. Though we do also have one of the earliest groups here in Los Angeles as well, through Senshin Buddhist Temple, and Kinara Taiko. But speaking about San Francisco Taiko Dojo, that group, which believe celebrated their 50th anniversary not that long ago, they lost their space. They lost their lease. And yeah, so they're on GoFundMe, like, oh my gosh, we need a new space. And I mean, it's like there's just no way to win, There's no stability, security. And so that's something that I'm sure a lot of small business owners and artists, creatives of many types can relate to us on. But it's just like the specific ways it plays out are just so frustrating. So, yeah. And it just makes me all the more grateful, Tony, that you would share this space with us and, help put out and ask us these great questions so that we can but continue talking about these things. Just so grateful, that we can be on your platform and just want to acknowledge all the labor that you're doing to make this happen. And just thank you.
Cool. And thanks for sharing the insights on behalf of the, as of today, 200 listeners, that we have over on Spotify. So yeah, these things do reach people. And, I think, it is a learning curve in terms of disseminating this properly so that, I don't lose track of things because, it's fairly easy in this weird intersection of art, culture, and tech I live in to get rabbit hole into things. But every so often, people like this particular Taiko group, I think is helpful to help really contextualize what I personally champion when it comes to the very concept of Whispel, because many people have a very consumeristic perspective when it comes to what they enjoy, be it filmmaking or gaming or, in this instance, music. But I do think hearing firsthand accounts from these people involved in these industries is important, and especially when it comes to the legal kind of context, because believe it or not, there's a lot of that comes into play when it comes to the music world, especially when you account for the fact that certain pieces that you're playing, assuming that you're live streaming them, may or may not be copyright striked, especially on Twitch, which is like its all rabbit hole and can of worm to unpack at some point. But yeah, with that said, that's plenty for today, and appreciate you folks taking the time to come on, and I look forward to seeing updates on the tour. I, for one, will disseminate excerpts of this as I see them come my way, whether through Instagram and other channels, and then I'll stitch them and combine them with the very conversations that we've had here as to perhaps help generate traction, if you will. And I can even forward that to you as well, to help serve as content, because like in the age of like artistry, it's like content. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, what's up, Sassin?
Was just gonna say, please do invite us as collaborators, tag us, so that we can also cross promote. Yes, please.
Oh
Yeah, like you may find some Taiko players who sign up for your stuff too. Who knows? So yeah, we do have some friends. I swear, and we're grateful for them and all that. But yeah, so cool. Yeah, let's cross promote. Let's thank you for that solidarity. That's all I just wanted to say. Please do invite us to as collaborators or whatever the for each platform, whatever the technique to do that is. Please do. We will do that.
Okay, yeah. So for starters, I guess it's worth mentioning that as of currently, Spotify, YouTube, Reddit, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, also known as Meta, and obviously here Twitter, and Substack are the places that are currently mostly prioritized in terms of dissemination. So chances are, if something has been posted on Instagram, it's going to be reposted elsewhere. And I'm well aware that spreading oneself spin can be an issue within the arts community, but based on my own ventures and what I've seen and what works over time, um, give Facebook another shot. Facebook actually is a very great source of gaining traction way quicker compared to every other platform. Because the caveat with TikTok, it's that, yeah, it has a bigger user base in terms of like the demographics that use it, but it's also very location sensitive. So if you make a lot of posts that pertain to an event that will happen in, I don't know, say Wyoming or whatever, and you keep spamming that over and over, you're effectively telling TikTok, hey, I want people in Wyoming to see this. It's like little tricks and tips I've discovered for myself along the way that has allowed me to expand so fast. Because I have people even listening to me in Australia right now, which is kind of wild to think about. So, hey, kangaroo people, hope you're enjoying that. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And it's customary to plug things before I close this up. So if you have anything else you'd like to plug, whether on the organization level or community level, feel free to do so.
Yeah, I just also wanted to say thank you so much for having us here. This has been really, really great. I've really appreciated this space. And yeah, like Sasson said, you offering up this platform for us to share what we're doing.
Yeah, what's up, Sassi?
Mazain, share your socials.
Oh, right. So I'm obviously here on Twitter at Mazain Roselight. I think it's the same on Instagram and also YouTube. I think those are the main platforms I'm on. I do have a Facebook, and I think it's linked to my Instagram. So,
Okay, so our group that we were just talking about today, Mujo Dreamflight, we are on Instagram and YouTube at MUJODREAMFLIGHT. And another organization we mentioned today, Trans Non-Binary Taiko Artists Global Action Collective, that is also on Instagram at Trans Non-Binary Taiko Artists. Kind of long, but you can also DM us to find. And that's also on Twitter and Facebook. Mazain will correct me if I'm wrong. We have had other social handles that we've used for some of our previous work, but for personals, I am on Instagram at Sasson Cain, SASENCAIN, and on YouTube a lot more than that, at Sasson Taiko, SASENTAIKO. Yeah, to be clear, I'm the only one not on Facebook. Everybody else is on Facebook. It's just me. It's just a personal hang up. I know the cost that it comes with, but it's just me. Everybody else is on Facebook. Yeah, it's okay. So, yeah.
Okay. And lastly, for the people listening that would potentially be interested in doing so, what's the best way to support your endeavors as a group financially?
So we're accepting donations, especially for the tour, through our fiscal sponsor located in Minneapolis, Taiko Arts Midwest. They have a donate. They're a 501c3. They're a nonprofit. So through Taiko Arts Midwest, if you go to their website, taikoarts.org, I believe, their donate button, you can donate to us just in where it says what name do you want to use for donating. Just put a note that it's for Mujo Dream Flight or the Heimweh Tour or just anything you remember. Like, we know the person who runs that group. She'll know what you mean. But yeah, that way you can earmark it to support us specifically, as opposed to some awesome Taiko people in Minnesota who should also be supported, but different group. And also, so that is that's 501c3. So that's like for tax purposes, charitable contribution. Munmun also has a coffee page. I want to say it's coffee/yimanwi. I'm double checking right now. Sorry, Munmun left already, so I'm just double checking. Okay, I found it. So it's coffee, ko-fi.com/manmanmui, which is MANMANMUI. And so you can see some of the fundraising for some previous projects we've done, and also, of course, for the future as well. Manman has a great website, yimanwi.com. Sorry, just a moment. Just double checking. Oh my gosh. Yes, okay. YEEMANMUI.com, which also links to their Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, the LinkedIn. And also, since Manman isn't here, I want to make sure to mention some of Manman's socials. So on Manman, on Instagram, you can find Manman at Yimanwi, YEEMANMUI. Manman is also on YouTube. And just in general, for lessons with Manman and with the rest of us too, but certainly for Manman, through Instagram, like in the bio, there's links to Taiko Together LA. There's links to Manman's project that they mentioned, Actually Artistic Artists, the collaboration with Carrie Carter, who we brought up before. There's just so many projects that we have going on. And honestly, Instagram ends up being a great kind of portfolio and ability to sort of promote these different projects. So Manman also has a newsletter that they send out information about these projects too. So Mujo Dream Flight in particular may not necessarily have some of these things, but we are cross-promoting through some of our existing our existing marketing platforms that like Manman as an individual artist has already built up. So yes, please stay in touch with Manman, and in addition to our newer social media handles.
Cool. On that note, we're done. So this has been Taiko discussion and small business discussion with a spice of good old classic music theory thrown in, because why not? Thanks again, folks, for coming, and very much an open channel for another panel when needed. You can use the same link for scheduling as last time. And obviously, good luck with the tour, and look forward to seeing the documentary that comes out of that, if there's any. Figured I would plug that one lastly too, because that's very much something I personally look forward to see. Cool, we're done. Long enough.